Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about an old saying, no good deed goes unpunished. Now, I first heard about this proverb back in college. It was my senior year. My friend that I had met freshman year was a resident assistant for one of the dormitories. With that position, he got salary plus free room and board, which is a pretty nice deal for a college undergraduate. Well, it was a sweet deal until he got caught smoking weed with a group of the younger students he was supposed to be supervising. In one fell swoop, he managed to lose his job, his housing, his salary, and the free food service. So with no place to go, graduation 3 weeks away, I offered to let him stay with me in my tiny 400 square foot studio apartment, completely rent-free. My only request was that there was no smoking in the apartment, buy your own food, and pay for any long-distance phone calls. That seemed like a fair and reasonable expectation for me to hold, but it turns out these simple requests were asking way too much of this person. It wasn't long before he made a total nuisance out of himself, to the point where building management actually got involved and threatened to kick me out. Now, in 3 years, I had never had an issue with management. Their office was right next door to my apartment. Never a cross word from them. This goof managed to raise their ire in less than a week. All of this came to a head after management was trying to show an apartment and noticed the distinct smell of cannabis wafting from my door. I didn't even smoke, and this clown turned my apartment into a hot box with 3 of his bong buddies. It was like living with Chris Farley from the movie Tommy Boy. Just a walking disaster. And while that movie was hilarious, trust me, it's not so fun when you're living it. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why didn't you just put him out at the curb? And you'd be 100% correct. Looking back, I really should have. But at the time, I was already going through a lot. I was driving back and forth every weekend to see my father, who was in late-stage terminal cancer. I just didn't have the energy left to get into it with someone. And I foolishly thought that it would be easiest and best to just let the clock run out, like in basketball. At the time, I didn't fully appreciate how long 3 weeks could actually feel. I was in shock and disbelief that somebody would behave this way after I threw him a lifeline so he could focus on graduation rather than finding a place to live. And let's not forget, he was well aware of the situation I was dealing with at home. You know, I was young and I had to learn this lesson the hard way. But the good news is, when you learn a lesson the hard way, you don't forget it. Anyway, I was so frustrated and beside myself that I called my uncle, who was a Jesuit priest. I was hoping he'd have something to offer, some sort of wisdom, a solution to my dilemma. At the very least, maybe he could say a prayer for me or ask God to show some mercy. My uncle patiently listened as I aired my grievances. When I was done venting, he simply said, and I quote, "No good deed goes unpunished," end quote. Needless to say, I was a bit disappointed. Surely a man of the cloth with 4 master's degrees and 2 PhDs would have something more. A man who has spent his entire life with roommates would have some sort of insight to navigate me through this nightmare. Now, to be fair, I'm pretty confident that God broke the mold when he created my former friend. He really was one of a kind. He was the roommate from hell. Looking back, those were wise words, because 30 years later, I still remember it like it was yesterday. Now, the proverb, no good deed goes unpunished, dates back to the 12th century. And in simplest terms, it states that sometimes our goodwill and kindness will not be met with gratitude or rewards, but rather suffering and punishment. Now, does this mean that I no longer try to help people? No. But it does mean that I'm more cautious before I stick my neck out. I guess you could say, once burned, twice shy. In this case, my friend put himself into a bind because he was careless. He was reckless. He didn't respect his job. or think about how those decisions might negatively impact his graduation. So in hindsight, it's really not a surprise that his lack of insight would transfer into my world. I always say if somebody's reckless with their own life, they're going to be a whole lot less careful with yours. In the end, I didn't get a thank you. I got a trashed apartment. The grand finale of this inconsiderate goof was to throw a big graduation party at my apartment without asking when I was out of town to see my sick father. True to form, when I came back for summer school 2 weeks later, I found that he had left the entire mess for me to clean up. 20 bags of garbage, food all over the counter, no toilet paper, just a pile of newspapers next to the toilet. Make of that what you will. But the final nail in the coffin of our 4-year friendship was when I walked into the bathroom and I saw that it was covered in projectile beer vomit. Killian's Red, to be exact. The only thing that he cleaned up and took care of was to take out the keg so that he could get his deposit back. I'm telling you, this guy was a real piece of work. Now, if you've gotten this far, I'm not going to leave you on a down note. Everyone loves a happy ending, so here it is. Fast forward 30 years. I was curious one day and I wondered to myself, what happened to this guy? I didn't know whether to look at social media or Google his name in the Darwin Awards. Thanks to the power of the internet, I learned that his life has turned out exactly as one would expect after hearing this story. I guess the old adage is true. You reap what you sow. Anyway, I hope you got something out of this. If you did, please click like and subscribe. New content drops every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Until next time, thank you for joining me and have a great night.